All right, here we go. All right, welcome to Sober Heathen Podcast. I am the Sober Heathen. My name is Scott. Welcome, friend and foe. It always feels too long in between podcasts these days with work and life. But really happy to have April on today. April, we'll just jump right in. Welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome to the show.
Okay. So I am a professional mental health and substance abuse counselor. I have been in the field for 16 years, going on 17 years here soon. And I have addiction in my past, different substances. So I actually have I don't count anymore, but it's about 35 years sober.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations.
So yeah, I did have like 2 or 3 times in there where there was mini relapses, and I say mini because when we relapse, we never actually know how long that's going to last. We tell ourselves just today or just tonight or just this weekend. So like my first one was like a day and the second one was like 3 days. So I feel like I got lucky in that aspect.
Sure.
But I like working in addiction. It's my passion. There was a point where I kind of left the field and went just straight over to like just doing mental health, and I actually really missed working in substance abuse. So
Sure.
it's something I really like to do. So that's my work life.
Great.
Yeah.
It's pretty good one. Yeah. I mean, 16, 17 years in something that's really amazing. You know, uh, coming from addiction, I think, to work with other people, that obviously gives you an education that other people don't have. I've kind of found it weird, and this might be wrong of me to say, but I say what I feel on the podcast. So
Mm,
like I'll get in real life situations, or not everything's real life. I'll get in a situation where I'm dealing with people, and I'll be like, man, give me an alcoholic or an addict. I can talk to them and we can have
yeah.
more adult conversations than I can with the normies, as I reference
Yeah.
people sometimes. It's just like yeah, it sucks. And the years that I went through of alcoholism, it really sucks to go through all that I had to, but it really brings other things into perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that too. It's, when you've been through life and you've been through challenges, there's a level where you can kind of relate with those who have been through the same thing. I think that's one of the things about my job that pretty much helps the most is that I've actually been there. So I can relate with my clients. So I've actually been through abuse. I've been through divorce. I have been through murder, suicide, sudden death. I have 5 girls and a niece. My girls go from 35 to 15 years old. So I've raised
Wow.
6 teenage girls, so I have life knowledge. And to me, the life knowledge is much more important than the book knowledge, right? I
Absolutely.
have several degrees, but the life knowledge is to me more valuable, and it allows you to relate to the client,
Absolutely.
where you get it. I find that, and that is something that helps the clients to kind of realize, because I know what I look like, but and sometimes people will look at me and they'll be like, she doesn't have any issues.
Sure.
Well, that's not how it works, right? And then they relax and then they're willing to open up and to share and, to grow.
Yeah, I mean, as far as my last sobriety date, the last time I had a drink was September 11th of last year. So that date's coming up for that year, but
Nice.
I consider myself have been in recovery for quite a while. Since probably 2020, I really started to go, hey, I got a sponsor. Something wasn't clicking. There were attempts, there'd be, a few months here, a few months there, relapse, worse than ever, the whole roller coaster. I feel like I've been working toward it for a lot longer than what my sobriety date is.
Mm.
But you mentioned relapses. I wonder if with your both real life education and your education, uh, talk a little bit more about those relapses and how, yes, they last at different times, but what do you tell
But
somebody
we,
that talk about relapse, I guess?
well, we use because we don't like how we're feeling. That's why we use. We want to change how we're feeling. Either we want to, not feel the sad, the depression, the anger, the anxiety. And for some, it's they want to be happier. They want to go to this party and then they feel like in order to really enjoy themselves, they need to use. So what I found was that's the main thing is we use because we want to feel different. We don't want to feel the way we feel normal. And if we can get ourselves to where we're okay normally, we will quit seeking something outside of ourselves.
Sure.
We'll quit looking, right? The other biggest thing that I have found, not just with myself, but clients is not truly embracing there is no such thing as one. There is no such thing as one. It just is not a thing. And if you can get those two and really get a harness on those are probably the two main factors. So emotions, we have emotions because we're human, and it's going to happen. I think there's also kind of that like pink cloud where we're not going to have any bad emotions, right? If we get sober,
Right.
we're not going to have any struggles.
Sure.
But the reality is we're going to have emotions and we will always have them, and learning to be with them instead of running from them. That's one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I think you said a bunch of things that really hit home with me. The more that I've dealt with the trauma, I've been to 4 treatments. I've had countless therapists and counselors and psychiatrists even dealing with the trauma. And I talk about this a lot with people and on the podcast. At 6 months, I remember hitting my 6-month sobriety date this time around, and life had never felt better. 6 months and 1 day was a complete shit show. And I just hated everything. I didn't want to get out of bed. Everything was miserable. And it's been like that. And, last couple of weeks have been challenging because now when I think about drinking, it's like you said, I want to feel. It's not to ignore anything. I want to feel something, feel better. That's what it tries, that's what my mind is trying to tell me, I can at least feel something if I'm drunk, because things kind of get numb. And it's really important to have, and it sounds redundant, but those connections, one of the treatments they told me connection is opposite of addiction. So all these connections that you have to have and utilize these things to create those connections that you don't want to lose. A life that you don't want to drink over, and a lot of times, and for me, like looking at things right now, my kids are coming back from life, they're 10. I have a job that I want to do. I used to coach baseball and basketball, and now I'm kind of doing the recovery coach thing or working into that role and working with people and just talking about my journey. I'm doing everything and I have everything in my life that I thought I'd never have back again. A year ago, if you would have told me that I'd be sitting here doing this podcast and working where I'm working, have things, I would have gnawed off my own arm in order to get to this spot. If that's what you told me I had to do. But it's inside, like you're talking about. There's something, for in yourself.
Yeah. And that is also the key to being sober is, it's important to have reasons like my kids, my mom, my grandma, something like that. but it really has to come from within you. You
Sure.
have to be tired. You have to be done. You have to want a different life. Because if we use these external reasons, which they help, but if that's the sole reason, then it normally doesn't work, you know.
Yeah, I think the best
Um,
advice that was given to me from a sponsor was to stop calling everybody at home. And I did that for 2 or 3 weeks in treatment.
mm,
And stop putting how I feel for that day and this week all dependent on those calls and
oh
focused
yeah,
on myself. And that really did help.
yeah, yeah. That is, I know a lot of people. So I don't know if you know, like in our area, there's a treatment facility. It's actually where I did my internship was Odyssey Health.
Okay.
And it's a behavioral modification facility. And one of the first things was they take your phone, and everybody is so upset. But it's so important to focus on yourself, because addiction really in the end, it is about you and your internal world inside, and healing that internal world and getting yourself to that space where you feel okay. That is truly what it's about. And then learning that life is going to have challenges, and you have to learn to go through the challenges. So, in meetings, the phrase that they have is that you are the age that you started using.
Yeah, yeah,
And while there's some truth to that, it's not really the age, because I've had so many clients. I've had clients from, I don't know, 16 years old. My oldest client was 72. Um, and it's not really the age, because I've had people who have been able to um, like mature. It's that your coping skills are the age you started using.
okay,
So if you started really using at 17, but you have 40-year-old life, 17-year-old coping skills don't match 40-year-old life,
sure.
right? So what we have to do is learn to get the coping skills up to date. When you start using, so when I was getting my master's, I had this question of like, why do people become addicts? Why do some people become addicts and others don't? Because most teenagers try drugs. Not all, but most, right?
Sure.
But why do some become addicts? And what I found was that there were some factors. So one was you had the genetic disposition. So that meant that somebody in your family had addiction, whether that was 5 grandpas ago or whatever. It was in your DNA. So you had a higher likelihood, right?
Okay.
The other one was having some sort of neglect, abuse, trauma, that kind of thing in your life. And then the last one was having mental health issues. So if you had any depression, anxiety, bipolar, those were the 3 factors that led someone to trying a drug and then feeling that relief. And then what happens is it's any point forward that you feel any type of stress or adversity, the body and the mind says, hey, just go do that. So we stop coping, and the drug copes for us. So when you get sober, life seems really hard, but it's because we have to bring our coping skills up to date to match 40, 50, 60-year-old life.
Sure.
And that's the primary thing that I work with clients, is getting their coping skills up to date, helping them to be able to deal with life on life's terms.
Right on. So what are some of the coping skills that you see most often? Um, I mean, obviously dealing with feelings, that's a big one, you drown that out. But I noticed for me in my journey that, you know, bills and saving money and those type of adulting things. I didn't start drinking until I was 21, so I was a little farther than some people that start in high school and stuff. But I know that, bills come and I get anxiety and I just toss them to the side. Or, I'll save some money and then I'll spend a little bit and then I'll be like, oh, screw it, I'm not gonna have enough anyway, so I'm just spend the rest of it. Really juvenile way of thinking. But what are some skills that you see that really work for people? What are some techniques or things that you have them do that really show progress?
So one of the first things that I do is a lot of teaching. It's a lot of teaching and understanding of what addiction really is. So, for example, like the thing that was talked about, like the coping skills, that you haven't had to really cope with anything because the drug's been coping for you. And that's why it seems like you're being sober, you're doing the right thing, and it seems like life is coming after you. Life's not coming after you. We just haven't been able to cope. Not to mention the mess that we create has to clear up,
Sure.
right? You have to stay sober long enough for the mess to clear up that we created. But the other thing is also a lot of teaching of what addiction really is in the body and how that affects the body and how it affects the mind. So, for example, people, there is the saying, there's no such thing as one. People normally don't fully understand what that means. They know that it means I can't have one, but they don't really understand why. And this is not, of course, a complete description, but it's enough for people to really get it. So every human, actually animal, mammal, has what's called homeostasis. Homeostasis is, am I okay? It's keeping everything at an even keel. So am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I cold? Is something hurting? That's homeostasis. The body's always working on that. This is why, like at night, you're sleeping and you get a blanket. You're like, how did I even get that? Well, you got cold. So your body's always working on it. When you have an addiction, it adds your addiction to your homeostasis.
Yeah.
So it says, I'm not really hungry, not really tired, but we don't have that. Go get that. And when you get that, then we'll be okay. So your body now thinks that addiction is actually part of its regular function. That's the cravings. That's the body. Anything outside of the body is a trigger. Okay. So when you get sober and you stay sober long enough, the cells have to figure out how to go back to normal. And the body starts screaming. But when you take a drug, it goes into the body, and it's really any drug. The whole body is affected. There's approximately 50 trillion cells in the human body. Every single cell is addicted. That means that your eyelashes, your elbows, it's all addicted. Alcohol, weed, whatever, doesn't go into the body and say, you know what? I don't really like feet. I'm going to skip that part.
Right.
Right? It doesn't do that. So people have to really understand the entire body is addicted. All your cells. Cells are microscopic. You can't see them.
Sure.
They're teeny tiny, right? But they're like a hologram of you. If you just take one cell, look at it, it's like a hologram. So every cell is addicted. When you get sober and the cells finally start to figure out, okay, how can I do this normally? Oh, I can do this normally. Yes, you can. All it takes is one drop of your drug and you wake up all 50 trillion cells.
Hmm.
That is why there's no such thing as one. So that's one of the things that I do is teach. I teach them really what's happening with addiction. What's really happening in your mind, what's happening in your body. And the other big things that I find literally across the board, and this is global. I have worked with people that are, in different countries and things like that, is self-esteem and anxiety. those two factors are literally global. People do not have self-esteem and they have tremendous amounts of fear.
Sure.
And they have these conditioned patterns of not believing in themselves, not feeling like they're worthy, not feeling like they deserve good. So we'll have people that will get sober, they'll do good, and then they'll self-sabotage. Right. And then the anxiety is just, it's seriously so prevalent. So many people are just afraid, and the mind runs and runs and runs and tells them all these stories. And so those are the two other biggest things that I have to work with pretty much with almost every client, even if I have a client that doesn't necessarily have issues. And I do have some of those clients where they're doing pretty well. They have a little bit of an addiction. That anxiety is still there.
Sure. Yeah, it's amazing. I haven't done thousands of podcasts, but I've done, I think, hundreds now. And I've had people from, Australia, Ireland, England, I've had Canada, all over the US. And it just amazes me how you can hear people saying a lot of the same things, but when you say it a certain way, it's really what catches people's ear. When you talk about the cells and how every cell is addicted and how, one cell being triggered will wake up the rest. I think it's when people can explain it in different ways and use that really made me think about it in a different way. And I think that's why I really do this podcast, is because, just hearing the same thing, but maybe even worded a little bit differently, can be the difference between a breakthrough and somebody just saying, all right, I've heard this 100 times. But I think that's very fascinating. AA, obviously, AA is, one's too many and a thousand's not enough. That's kind of where I thought you were going. And then you went completely different with the cells. And I think that was fantastic. That was a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I have cultivated from, again, life and then being in the field. It's just something that just kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh, wait a minute. What, why is it so hard? Why are the cravings so strong? Why, and of course, cravings and triggers play on each other, but it is much easier to ward off the triggers when you don't have the cravings. But again, they do play off of each other. And then my thing was always like, it needs to make sense to me. It needs to make sense and it needs to be understandable, because if it doesn't make sense and I can't understand it, then I can't use it. So it's just my way of trying to get people to really understand what's happening in their bodies.
Yeah, because I know in my thought process, not understanding the chemical side and what's going on inside the body, it's just, I'm bad. I'm bad.
Yeah.
I'm bad because I do this. And it really takes some relief off you to realize that it's a lot more than just poor decisions. And it takes forever for people to realize, I did bad, I am not bad. And I'm still working on that. But you just, the way society reacts to, I hate saying hard drug users. I hate that, because it's like alcohol and drugs both suck equally. It's not like, oh, hard drugs, but and then I lost my thought because I went off on a tangent about hard drugs.
There is so that is another thing that I have to work a lot with people, is that guilt, that shame. And there are still many, many people out there who believe that addiction is just purely moral. It's purely just stop, just don't do it.
It's a choice.
Well, if you actually understand the biological part of it, it is much harder than just stop. Now I have seen people just stop. I've actually had some people in my family just stop. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, but it's much more than that.
Can't stand those people. No, I'm just kidding.
Just like, whatever, I actually had an uncle who he just stopped, and now he drinks a pot of coffee a day, but he just stopped and he just started drinking coffee. Nope, never said a word, never said ow, never said nothing, just done, But most people, it's not like that. So it is much more than a moral decision. It is a biological issue. It is a moral, ethical issue. It is also an emotional, mental issue.
Yeah.
It's way more dynamic than that. And, um, if it wasn't that, then I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah.
And that is why we have meetings, we have AA, NA, Smart Recovery. We have those because it does require support.
Mhm.
You need support for it. And then, the thing about the guilt and the shame. So shame is I'm a bad person. That is shame. Guilt is I have done something bad. There is a difference between shame and guilt. The thing is that guilt only serves a purpose until you learn the lesson. After the lesson is learned, after you can pull out whatever you can pull out of that experience, guilt is useless. It will not help you. It will only hold you back.
Yes.
Right.
Perfect.
And you have to understand that there are two of you inside one body. So unfortunately, you share the same body, you share the same life, but there is an addict part of you and there is you. The addict only knows using. It only knows get me my drug. Now, when you take a drug, and it's really any drug. So I had a daughter, I have a daughter, that there was one point where she would call me like every single morning of her life and she would talk to me. And there's this one morning where I was trying to talk to her and she was coming back with things that were like way in left field. And finally I was like, Candace, please take a drink of coffee. I can't even have a conversation with you. She took a drink of coffee and within a couple minutes, voila, her mind was awake.
Oh, wow.
She was there. I was like, okay, now can we talk? Right?
Right.
Because the frontal lobe, which is in front of your brain, is affected. Any drug. She took that coffee, frontal lobe woke up. Oh, voila, she's there. She's coherent. She can make sense. Right?
Wow.
So when you take a drug, the first part of your brain that is affected is that frontal lobe, which holds your reasoning, your right, wrong, rationale, your morals, concept of time. It holds your inhibition, ability to say no. Now, I am not by any way excusing this, but this is why people steal from grandma while they're using.
Sure.
Again, I'm not excusing it. However, that frontal lobe is affected when you take drugs. So you have to realize there is the addict you and there is you. The things that you did while you were an addict, it is because your body was affected, your frontal lobe was affected, and you made choices you would never do if you were sober.
Yeah.
We would never not show up to the birthday party if we were sober.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not making excuses for those behaviors,
No.
but you have to have a level of compassion and understanding for
Understanding. Yeah.
how did I do those things? And not only that, but if you have family of loved ones who are addicts and they have done things, again, not excusing, but just an understanding of how can they do that? That's why.
Yep.
That's why they can do it.
This is
So-
what this is. Keep going. I'm sorry. I want to interrupt you.
So that is another thing that I always comes up at some point in the treatment. And I don't put limits on treatment. Some people need me 2 months. Some people need me for 8
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
It's whatever, but that is something that comes up. So you have to be able to look at that. Now you make your amends, you do all of that,
Sure.
but there has to be a point where you look at and say, that was the addict me. That's not the real me.
As I was going to say, this is why I do the podcast. I mean, like I said, this is great stuff because, when an addict or alcoholic, and I can only speak for myself, but when I have said things in the past, I don't know why I did this. Scott, how could you do this?
Mhm.
I don't know. I was hijacked, and that's kind of what you were saying in that, I have stolen from grandma. I was raised by grandma. things would take over and I'd do these things. And there's things that I would feel terrible for later on, but in the moment, it was the right thing to do. I had to do it. I had to do ABC and I had to do it now. That's not a justification and I would never use it, just like
Right.
you said, but it is what it is. And it's both bad choices and it is, being hijacked mentally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, we're not excusing the behaviors. We're not saying you don't make amends,
Sure.
but it is having that level of understanding and compassion for yourself and also perhaps for others, you know, that have done things. Now, that doesn't mean we don't ever need to set a boundary or say, hey, you know what? It's not healthy for me to be in this relationship with you, whatever. But especially for the self, because people beat up themselves for many, many years of how could I do this and why did I do that? The other thing that we do notoriously as humans is we beat ourselves up for the choices we made in the past based off of the information we have today. You did not have the same knowledge or information that you have today that you had 2 years ago. You
Right.
just simply didn't. But we will judge ourselves and take that knowledge we have
Yeah.
today and we will judge ourselves for what we did 2 years ago, but we are not the same person.
Yep.
We do not have the same knowledge.
Yeah.
We
That's
don't.
great. That is great.
So you have to be able to look at that person 3 years ago and say, okay, yeah, well, they weren't really the smartest, were they? You know, you simply just didn't have the same knowledge. You didn't have the same experiences, the same knowledge. So how were you supposed to make a different choice? You can say, well, I should have. Well, okay, but you still don't have the knowledge you have right now. Right. So if you would have known, oh, I'm going to go to jail, I'm going to do this or that, but you had never experienced going to jail, you really don't know, do you?
Right.
Now, after you go to jail, you're like, oh, I should have, but now you really know. Don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So there has to also be a level of compassion there that you just didn't have the knowledge. You just didn't. You can should it all day, should, could, would, but you just didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I was working on the knowledge that it's going to be different this time, even though, you know what I mean? It never was,
Yeah.
it was never that, but it's like, okay, well, I did 2 months, so I can go back and then I'll do 2 months again later, or you know what I mean? But no, those are all good points,
Yeah. So one of the things that happens is, and that's the main thing. Like there is no such thing as one. It is not something you will ever control. So like alcohol, for example, all drugs really, but we'll take alcohol, for example. People think that they're drunk. You're not drunk. You're poisoned. Alcohol is a poison. It goes into the body, it poisons the body, and you become drunk, right? But your blood, your kidney, your liver, your lymph can't get this poison out fast enough.
Yeah.
So next thing you know, you're kind of falling over, right? And alcohol is actually also a depressant. And that's why people end up in the bar fight, domestic violence, crying. It's actually a depressant.
Sure.
So when you take this substance and you keep taking the substance, what happens is your body's actually trying to figure out how to save your life. So your body learns how to metabolize this poison faster and faster and faster. And that is what we call increased tolerance. And that process never ends until it kills you.
Yeah.
Never ends. And the thing though is about those cells are also super intelligent. They're dynamic. DNA is actually a storage medium. And everything you have ever ate, ever done your entire life is stored in your cells. It never, ever, ever forgets your addiction. Now, it can fade, but it never actually forgets your addiction. So that is why when you have relapse, it's only a matter of a few days and you're back to where you stopped, usually plus some. that is why.
Yeah, DNA is storage medium. See, this,
It is
I
a
mean,
storage medium.
that is, yeah,
Yeah, they've had scientific studies, research done. They can store data onto DNA,
yeah,
but your cells are a storage medium. They are intelligent. They do not forget. There's actually, I think the studies now, it started out with 7 and then there was 14, but now it's like 20 generations of DNA information. So that's 20 grandpas ago
yeah.
on
I,
your DNA.
I mean, yeah, if you just think about it, obviously, you'll see a grandchild, or as they grow up, you'll see features of their grandparents in them. Your DNA knew that as you were being created, and it stored all that information. I mean,
Yeah.
it completely makes sense.
Well, and that's why you get the one person who's got the green eyes or
Yeah.
whatever, and you're like, where'd that come from?
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is what I do. This is why, I seen your thing and I thought I can go and talk about this.
Well, I'm so glad you did,
So
because I mean, like I said, there's ways, I have heard so many meetings and so many things, and somebody will be saying something, but they'll change a couple words, and then it's like, wow, that makes a lot more sense. And I felt that about 4 times or more in this conversation alone on just the way you were presenting things. So I really hope that it'll help some people. I never know when I can feel a podcast is going to be great, and then I upload it, and then I hear nothing, and then I'm like, oh, that one was a meh. And then all of a sudden I'm getting DMs and comments like, wow, this helped me so much. Wow, when they said this really brought something, to the forefront or whatever. So I just think, I just really enjoy doing this, and I'm really glad that, we connected on LinkedIn. And what else are you doing? I see that you do, on your LinkedIn, you said a speaker. Do you do a lot of speaking?
I do podcast, and then
Oh, awesome.
uh I used to do like my own, and I have like a Facebook group, and I have other things that I do. But the other work that I do is geared towards energy work.
Awesome.
So it's not necessarily geared towards substance abuse. I mean, they go together because really it's all healing. And as far as the speaking, I've done a couple of those, but that's actually ultimately my goal.
Okay, great.
That's what I want to do.
Right.
If I could like eventually retire from my job and do speaking, that would be great.
Wouldn't that be fun? I love doing it. People are terrified. They're like, why, how do you get on a podcast and talk like that? Well, for one, I grew up through doing construction. I had to do a lot of presentations in front of a lot of people that were very nitpicky. When you say, I'm sure you know about OSHA, when you're dealing with things and you're trying to present things in a way that's good. So that helped. But I love it too. So go ahead, and if you have a podcast or you want to plug anything, please feel free. And hopefully anybody that listens to it will come check you out.
Well, I do have a podcast. I haven't put anything on it for a while. So it's there. So I work for Sacred Heart, which is a company, and they're kindly conventional, right? And I stay in that realm with them.
Right on.
But I have a side business that's called Soul Essentials Healing. And through that, I have integrated my years of being a mental health counselor, substance abuse counselor, and then also my trainings in energy work, such as Reiki. I'm also a certified hypnotherapist. I'm a certified auricular acupuncturist.
Oh, wow.
I have a bunch of certifications, and I kind of integrate all of them. And so, if anybody wants to look that up, they're welcome to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
But I didn't really have any goals or motives. I was just thought I'd come on here and support your podcast.
Well, and I tried to support everybody, because the more pathways are available, the more information people have. I've had people, from all different pathways come on and talk, and I feel like I'm on my own pathway. I butt heads with AA sometimes because my thoughts are a little different. I love AA. I have 2 big books that are both highlighted and sticky noted all over the place. I've been down that road, and it's been part of my foundation. But yeah, the more pathways that are available to people like acupuncture, that's something I'd like to look into one day just to learn more about it. If that's
Yeah,
what can save you.
actually, Sacred Heart offered that. I've always wanted it because Chinese medicine and acupuncture actually saved my life once.
Oh,
I
wow.
was just so ill and I couldn't get the doctors to figure it out. And one treatment with acupuncture, that's better.
What?
One treatment. Oh yeah, I was so ill, so ill. It was after my brother committed suicide, and I just became so ill after that, and I like couldn't eat anything. I ended up with a kidney infection. I was so sick. And I pulled into this acupuncture place and I just went in and I just said to the lady, like, I'm dying. And one treatment, I was better.
Wow.
It
Does it
was
hurt?
amazing still.
Does it
No,
hurt at all?
I
I
mean,
mean,
it
you
hurts for
see these,
like
you
a
see all these little,
millisecond. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, once it's in, it's done. So Sacred Heart actually offered auricular acupuncture training. I took that back in 2011.
Okay.
And it is specific for addiction and it's just specific for detox,
Wow.
but it does work for other things.
Sure.
So the person who did that is not even with Sacred Heart anymore, but Sacred Heart offered that years ago. And pre-COVID, when I ran a group, I would do meditation and acupuncture together.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, um, but I mean, there's many ways to finding your internal peace and many ways to finding your path. And I always let the client, you know what, it's up to you, whatever works for you. If it's safe and sober, I'm all for it,
Right.
you know. And many people, they go different ways. So I'm all about that.
That's
Finding
great.
your own way. Yeah.
It's so refreshing to hear. And, like when I was first coming into this whole thing, it was the feeling I got was AA or nothing. Go talk to a therapist,
Yeah.
but it's AA or nothing. And then you get into that realm of AA, and then you'll find people like, well, then you get the superiority complex, which is ego, which is opposite of what
Oh,
AA
yeah.
is supposed to do, and it's just
Yeah.
being able to just even present, hey, have you ever heard of refuge recovery? Hey, have you ever heard of acupuncture? Hey, have you ever tried this?
Yeah.
Just to be able to show people there are other doors to walk through and explore is
Well, and that's the thing for me is the energy work was actually my key. Like
okay.
out of all the things, like that was the one that was like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm at. And I have clients that will come to me, they can't stand meetings, they hate them,
Yeah.
never go, and they stay sober. And
Yeah.
then I have clients that go every day. And I'm open, I don't care, whatever
Yep.
works for you. If every day works for you or if never, but I do suggest that you do something else. If you don't, you need something,
Right.
right? Whether it's church or whether like me, I do the energy work, or if you do smart recovery or you do need something,
Yep.
right? To
Yep.
give you kind of that like fulfillment, that connection.
The connection's huge, yeah, because I mean, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And so if you don't do that, you're
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't stop it. Well, you're not trying anything new. Well, I know, but why can't I, you know what I mean? You gotta add to it. This was really fun, April. I really appreciate that. Maybe
Thank you.
sometime we can hook up again and talk about the energy thing a little more in depth. I
Sure.
think I want to keep it around 40 minutes because attention span's a little short and you had so much good information. I really want to get this uploaded and get it plugged. I'll send you a link to the YouTube video and then you can listen back. Anybody can listen back on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's really great to meet you. I know that,
Thank you.
Sacred Heart is all over the state, so we'd probably never get a chance to meet in person, but really, really, really great to meet you and hear this message. It was great. Thank you, April.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
You too.
Bye-bye.